Hi, Chris Speaks here today with former Congressman Mo Brooks, who's come on to allow me the privilege to interview him. I'd like to say thank you, Congressman, and how are you?
I'm doing great. Life is good.
Great. So, I followed you for a lot of years. You've been a very interesting character. What got you involved in politics?
Ronald Reagan, Jimmy Carter, and the economic malaise brought about by Jimmy Carter's weakness in the late 1970s.
Wow. So, and you got involved in what, early 80s then?
I should also add, in my formative years, when I was a teenager, I discovered that there was this thing called a draft where the government could forcibly take you and make you fight for whatever cause the government decided was appropriate. And then I did research on Vietnam to discern why we were fighting in Vietnam, keeping in mind that I'm a teenager, 10th grader, and discovered that the government was drafting people and making them fight in a war that the United States government would not let them win. And 50,000 Americans lost their lives fighting in a war that the United States government would not let them win. And so that was an eye-opening experience. It taught me very quickly that our republic needs better leaders than we had. So you had that experience coupled with seeing how well Ronald Reagan did, how poorly Jimmy Carter did, prompted me to run for the state legislature in 1982.
And did you win that race?
Yes, at the time, Republicans were outnumbered by Democrats 31-0 in statewide offices. Republicans had 0. And in the legislature, we were outnumbered 136-4 before I was elected. Now, I should add that the Democrats also tried to steal the election that I was involved in. The Democrats rigged 11 of 45 voting machines to not register votes for Mo Brooks. They did not want the dam to be breached in North Alabama. At the time, there were 0 elected legislators and Republican legislators in the northern third of the state. And the Democrats saw me as such a threat that they rigged 25% of the voting machines to register votes for everybody else on the ballot but me. It's so bad that at one voting location where there were 5 rigged machines, ultimately the poll workers announced to voters as they came in that if you want to vote for Mo Brooks, you can sign your name on a sheet on the wall. You'll lose your secret ballot voting rights, but at least you can vote for Mo Brooks if those are your brothers.
Interesting. So, how long did you serve in the legislature before you moved into the county commission?
Well, I was elected 4 times to the legislature, and then I was appointed to Madison County District Attorney by Guy Hunt. Unfortunately, when I ran for election a couple of years later, I was unsuccessful in a year in which the Democrats in Madison County won every single race.
Oh, really? So
Yep.
from there, you went to sorry.
Sorry, sir. From there, you went to you ran in 2006 against George Wallace Jr. and Luther Strange for lieutenant governor. Tell me about that race. You was kind of
Well, I was elected 3 times to the Madison County Commission as a Republican before the 2006 lieutenant governor's race. And I ran for lieutenant governor because I was not happy with the quality of state government we were getting from the people who were elected to statewide office and from the state legislature. Quite frankly, I'm tired of Alabama being at or near the bottom of almost every standard of living, given the natural resources we have and the ability of our people to do much, much better if we had better governing officials.
So you see, so in your opinion, you see that we have many resources that Alabama should not be ranked 56th, 57th, and 58th and everything.
Well, we're not ever ranked 56th, 57th, or 58th.
I'm sorry. I mean 46, 47, 48.
You can add, like the District of Columbia if you wish, but we're ranked at the bottom, and we are blessed with a beautiful state. We are blessed with an abundance of natural resources, and we're blessed with, by and large, good people who believe in the work ethic. So we should be doing better than we have been doing. And the only drawback I can discern is the quality of our legislature and other state government officials.
Do you think that we have, just put it blankly, so much corruption going on in Montgomery that we're not getting what we should be getting?
Well, there is some illegal corruption in Montgomery, as evidenced by the number of legislators and statewide office holders who have been indicted and convicted. But more prevalent is what I would call legal corruption. Legal corruption is where there's no law against it, but it corrupts the public policy debate. And to a very large degree, Montgomery is run by special interest groups, just as special interest groups run Washington, D.C. You're familiar with the phrase, money is the mother's milk of politics. That's because the money enables candidates who are owned by special interests to self-promote themselves better than what they actually are, and also empowers those candidates that are favored by special interest groups to denigrate the reputations of their opponents. And those two things put together result in less than adequate representation in statewide offices and in the state legislature.
Interesting answer. So after that race right there, and to go against guys who were had more funding, and I remember you made a statement which I think resonated with a populist appeal. That you had a cell phone, a truck, and you didn't need them. You was going on your own on this campaign, which I thought was a very something that really could have spoke to the voters. Would you just outspent in that race?
Well, I was up against two individuals, both of whom had significant political assets. George Wallace Jr. obviously had name recognition. And then Luther Strange was the special interest candidate who was the Hoover vacuum cleaner fundraising. So those two, there are a number of other candidates. I ended up coming in third with Luther Strange and George Wallace going to the runoff.
Excellent. So, fast forward for a couple of years. When did you get elected to the Congress?
I was elected to the United States Congress in 2010, becoming the first Republican elected in the Tennessee Valley's congressional district in 136 years.
Wow, that is right. I forgot that you was the first Republican elected out of there. During your time in Congress, do you have a key piece of legislation that you were proud of that you passed or you supported?
Well, when you're in Congress or when you're in the legislature, often to get legislation passed, you have to sell out your state or sell out your country to the special interest groups that run the places. And I refuse to do that. So my greatest satisfaction in stopping things from happening. By way of example, from 2017 to 2018, I was primarily responsible for stopping the United States Congress from passing amnesty for illegal aliens. It did that by putting together a coalition of people that Paul Ryan needed to be elected Speaker of the House, and given the numbers that I was able to represent, I was able to procure from Paul Ryan a written commitment signed by him stating that he would not bring any amnesty bills to the House floor unless a majority of the Republican conference first agreed to bring it to the House floor. Well, a majority of the Republicans in Congress are opposed to amnesty for illegal aliens. So I was able to stop, for example, the Gang of Eight effort to give amnesty for illegal conduct. And as we all know, you give amnesty for illegal conduct, all you're doing is encouraging more of that illegal conduct. And so that's one of my proudest moments. Although I was also a founder, along with others, of the House Freedom Caucus. And we have been the group in the United States House of Representatives that steadfastly sticks to our campaign promises and does the things we tell the people we will do to get elected. Unfortunately, there are a lot of others in Congress who tell the public one thing and then do another in order to get the money that the special interests are willing to provide if you'll do what's bad for America.
Wow, Mo, it seems like that from what you're telling me, and I followed your career, that the media almost had a slant out against you.
Of course they do.
Because you sound like an American first guy, doing the right thing, and these guys are making you out to seem this monstrous racist who is only for the elite, and it seems like the total different story's been told.
Well, the public has liked the jobs I have done in the positions that I have held. I was the first Republican elected in history in Alabama House District 18, the first Republican elected in history in Alabama House District 10, the first Republican elected in 136 years to the Tennessee Valley's congressional district. And until the time that I left Congress, no Republican had successfully carried the Republican banner more times in general elections than I did. So there's a big difference between the media portrayal and what I actually am, what I actually do, and what the public, after I have served in a position, thinks of the job that I have done. But I do have special interests that very strongly dislike me because I'm not one of their puppets. By way of example, when I was first elected to the legislature against overwhelming odds, we prevailed despite having zero political action committee contributions. I think in that year, there were two candidates elected with zero political action committee money out of 140. And so the special interests, they don't like that. In 2010, I still did not have much in the way of special interest money, but I was able to prevail in a Republican primary despite being outspent by two other candidates, roughly $2.5 million to $160,000. But I must confess that special interest money does have an effect on elections, as evidenced by the money Luther Strange got in 2006, the money Luther Strange got in 2017 for the Senate race, and the money that Katie Britt got in 2022 for the Senate race. By and large, those candidates were able to use their special interest money to maximum effect to prevent me from winning those statewide races by, in part, projecting an image of me that was categorically false.
Before I get to that, your last race, I want to touch on something. In 2017, why do you think Roy Moore was the benefactor of that deal between, Luther Strange not, investigating more? How did he get so much support?
Well, Roy Moore, on his own merit, was able to attract a significant following based on the principles and positions he has taken over the years. But part of Luther Strange and Mitch McConnell's and the special interest strategy was to move voters from Mo Brooks to Roy Moore. They thought that they could more easily beat Roy Moore in a runoff and that they would not be able to beat Mo Brooks in a runoff. Well, obviously, their strategy was based on a grave misjudgment, in as much as Roy Moore trounced Luther Strange in the runoff.
Yeah, I think he got 63 out of 67 counties or something like that.
Well, it was a pretty big thumping of Luther Strange, at least in that race. We collectively, conservatives, were able to defeat the special interests despite the monetary imbalance.
Wow.
Of course, the special interests got even in the general election. Luther Strange, Richard Shelby, Katie Britt, they all supported, directly or indirectly, Doug Jones, the Democrat nominee, by working to suppress the Republican vote in that general election, thereby giving us a liberal, big spending Democrat, Doug Jones, for 3 years.
Yeah, that I don't know. That was awful the way the Republican Party abandoned that, especially with the lies that came out. There was, just flat like lies against Judge Moore 3 weeks before to go to the race. Like this is his fifth term, his fifth race, and now you come out with this kind of stuff. 3 weeks to go. He's been vindicated from now. So let me ask you a couple questions before I get into your last race. January 6th. The day Trump and Giuliani. Why did you go down there?
Why did I go to the Ellipse to give a speech?
Yeah.
Because the day before, I was asked to by the President of the United States.
Oh, okay. And I forgot, I don't want to misquote you on what you said about let's go down there and take some names. I mean, did you feel that you might have been inciting that crowd?
Well, you have to understand the context in which I was saying it. I was talking about beating weak-kneed Republicans in Republican primaries, and that it was Republicans that we needed to take down the names of and kick the asses in the next election. But the total media totally distorted that. And I should add, to put it in context, that Eric Swalwell bit off on the propaganda, the false assertions against me, and sued me in federal court for damages, claiming that I had contributed to the attack on the United States Capitol. Well, a Barack Obama appointed federal court judge looked at Eric Swalwell's evidence against me and my evidence that depicted what the truth was, and the Barack Obama federal court judge dismissed the lawsuit against me, and in the court order stated that there was, quote, no plausible argument, end quote, that I had anything to do with the attack on the United States Capitol. That's the federal court order that's exonerated me. It was by a Democrat appointed, a Barack Obama appointed federal court judge. So you can't get a better assessment of what the truth was than what is in that federal court order dismissing Congressman Eric Swalwell's lawsuit against me.
And we never get told these things right here.
No, that doesn't fit with the propaganda that the news media and the left and also the establishment wing of the Republican Party like to put out there.
So, man, this is getting some great information out here that probably people have not heard before. When you got in this race, you was running against Katie Britt, who had the Shelby Democrat money behind her, 500.
And the special interest money, keeping in mind that she's a professional lobbyist by trade. She was the lobbyist responsible for our higher gas taxes, and which resulted in higher gasoline prices at the pump.
And that results in higher food and higher goods and services.
That's correct. And in fact, we now have a United States senator whose spouse is a professional lobbyist. which may be a first in the history of the state of Alabama.
You know, back during that when that was going on, they came out at I think it was at a December, January thing, and Sean Ross was calling you a Montgomery or a Washington insider for 6 terms, and he had the backing like this. And I was like, wait, he's been in, there for 6 terms, 12 years. Shelby's been in there for 36 years and 6 terms. How are you're claiming that Britt's an outsider, but yet was this guy's chief of staff or something up into the last election.
And we're Katie
I was
Britt, a special interest lobbyist, promoting special interests to the detriment of the public good.
I was like, this is Pop McKellar. How can you compare this guy's 6 terms in there as compared to 40 years of liberal Shelby rule? I mean, they maybe how they turned on you now. How did it feel for you to back President Trump through thick and thin, and then pull his endorsement?
Well, let me explain my position with respect to relationships with other people. I agree with them and I work with them when I think they're right, and I disagree with them and oppose them when I think they're wrong. By way of example, when Donald Trump wanted to give amnesty to illegal aliens around 2019 and 2020, I opposed it. When Donald Trump wanted to expand Obamacare in the spring of 2017, I opposed him. When we House Freedom Caucus members were able to help Donald Trump understand that the special interest influence in the White House that was promoting the expansion of Obamacare was bad for America and that we ought to repeal and replace it, and Donald Trump backed off and went with a different piece of legislation addressing Obamacare, I supported it because it was better for the American people and had less socialized medicine in it rather than more. So that's how I interact with other people. We people come and go, but the principles that we believe in, the principles that we fight for, and the bad policy we fight against, those things last for a long, long time. So that's how I conduct myself. And Donald Trump and I agreed on a lot of things, but in August of 2021, he apparently wanted me to advocate something that I knew was contrary to the United States Constitution. He wanted me to publicly advocate the rescission of the election of 2020, which is not permitted by the United States Constitution, and to publicly advocate the forceful removal of Joe Biden from the White House. That's in violation of the United States Constitution. And Donald Trump wanted me to publicly advocate reinstating him as president after Joe Biden was physically removed from the White House. That violates the United States Constitution. And Donald Trump wanted me to advocate a special presidential election to do it all over again. That violates the United States Constitution. And I took an oath to defend and protect the United States Constitution. So in August of 2021, before the springtime election, Donald Trump was angry with me because I would not do it. And then finally, in the January, February, March timeframe of 2022, right before the Republican primary, he called me up and insisted that I advocate publicly things that I knew conflicted with the United States Constitution. I told him that I took an oath to defend and protect the Constitution. I was not going to do that. And not long thereafter, he rescinded his endorsement of me and decided that Katie Britt would make a better puppet. I'm no puppet to anybody. I do what I think is best for our state and our country, and I let the chips fall where they may. Now, I'm not always going to agree with everybody. Everybody's not going to always agree with me. But I want from people that I work with an intent to do the right thing. And if they're motivated by good intent, then our country and state are going to do well. It's when they are doing the wrong thing for bad reasons. I have real problems with people.
Wow. You know, you're not the person that the mainstream media has portrayed you as. It's just a shame because um, you know you're seems like you're a guy who wants to do the right thing for the American people, and fighting to do it, and they have just maligned you as some kind of monster.
That's the nature of the news media. They're
Well, I
basically
mean,
a propaganda outlet for the socialist movement in America.
and I'm afraid it's going to continue to get worse. This Marxist socialist movement to where, I mean, we've seen the breakdown and fabric of the American family to where, you know, we have, and I'll probably get attacked for this saying this, but we have stuff like the transgender movement and drag queen story hour that's just pushing something down our throats that this is not the American values that I grew up with.
Well, you hit on a key point there. They have every right in a land of freedom to do what they want to do. What they do not have the right to do is to force us to like it or agree with it. That liberty and freedom also extends to you and me, and we have the right to fight back because of our disagreement with the amoral values that some of these movements represent. A good part of it is evil, and we have the right to fight for good and fight against evil, and that includes the right to ostracize those who advocate what we believe are evil or bad moral values.
And when we say something like that, we're automatically classified as bigots or right wing extremists or something along those lines.
Oh, they
But I
like
don't.
to use the word prejudice. I'm prejudiced against turnip greens. I don't like them. You have a right to be prejudiced against bad things. And to the extent you are prejudiced against bad things, that's a good thing. What you're not allowed to do is to be prejudiced against people because of something over which they have no control. By way of example, their skin pigmentation. You can't do that in a freedom loving country like America where everyone's supposed to be treated equally. But you do have the right to reject the conduct of people because conduct is something over which they do have control.
That is a great answer right there. Um, where do you see us going forward as a nation now? I mean, if we've reached the point that this is just going to be a tidal wave that just continue to push this down our throats till it becomes normal?
If the American people do not wake up, do not start learning about the principles that have combined to make America the greatest nation in world history, a status that we have held now for 3/4 of a century. If the American people don't start doing their homework and doing a better job of electing people to state and federal offices, then we are going to suffer a catastrophic calamity. In particular, we're going to suffer a national insolvency and bankruptcy with all the damage and loss of life associated with a national insolvency and bankruptcy. So the American people, they are responsible for everything that goes on at a city level, at a county level, at a state level, and at a federal level, because by definition, the American people are the ones who elect the public officials to offices at each of those 4 branches of government. So when the American people complain, unless they have been actively doing what is necessary to foster better government by casting wise votes after having done homework or having run for public office themselves, unless they're willing to do what it takes, well, evil is going to triumph. And unfortunately, right now, bad public policy is emanating from every single level of the United States government, because people have not been engaging in their citizenship duties as our founding fathers had envisioned. So we're going to get what we deserve, because in a republic, by definition, the city, the county, the state, and the federal government always get what they deserve, because the citizens in those different governing levels were responsible for the elected officials who did the bad things that get done.
No, listening to you reminds me of one of my favorite politicians I've ever listened to. I thought was one of the smartest men ever, and that was Congressman Ron Paul, who I thought had.
Paul, by the way, he home run in one of our congressional baseball games, so he was a pretty doggone good baseball player. And Ron Paul was super as a congressman. I very much enjoyed interacting with him. And now Senator Rand Paul, Ron Paul's son. Rand Paul also does a great job as a United States Senator, one of the few in the Senate, probably a handful of 5 or less, that actually put America's interests first over the interests of special interests.
Hey, and that reminded me of something. Wasn't you at one of that shooting out there with that softball?
Yeah, a primary target of the socialist assassin. He had a slip of paper in his pocket that the FBI showed me. And on that slip of paper were his 6 primary targets with our names, our office numbers, our ages, and our physical descriptions. And so I was at that baseball shooting in Alexandria, Virginia in 2017. And I was one of the primary targets of that socialist, because I'm one of the leaders, or I was one of the leaders in the United States Congress for freedom, liberty, and the foundational principles that have combined to make us the greatest nation in history.
Yeah, I had almost forgot about that.
We were fortunate in that he was a Yankee and he was a socialist who didn't know how to shoot.
Good point. Yankee socialists who didn't know how to shoot. Yeah, that could have been a lot worse. Mo, have we seen the last of Mo Brooks in politics?
I never say never, but it is unlikely. I have done my best to serve my state and country and my county for almost 4 decades. And all too often, it's like beating your head up against a brick wall. And after a while, you start figuring out that perhaps there are other things you can do with your life that are more important. And right now, my life is a whole lot better than it was when I was in public service, because I'm able to spend more time with my wife, my 4 kids, my 4 kids-in-law, and my 13 grandchildren. So that is truly a blessing that I've been able to enjoy. And I should add, I want to thank all those people who voted against me for freeing me up from the responsibility and the angst and the dissatisfaction of dealing in a soul corrupting environment like that in Washington, D.C. If you get people who are elected who are doing the right thing, it's a punishment, because there are huge political forces that are trying to, on a daily basis, to denigrate you and beat you in the next election. And I'm freed up from all that hassle. I'll give you an example of what I mean when I say that special interests own Washington, D.C. You may not know this, but if you want to be chairman of a major committee in the House of Representatives, the initial bid price is $1.2 million. If you don't have $1.2 million with which to purchase that major committee chairmanship, then you are not considered. If there are multiple people who come up with that $1.2 million, then of course, whoever is willing to pay the most has the insider's track on getting that position. Now, the question becomes then, well, where do you get the $1.2 million to buy a chairmanship of a major committee? You can't get that from Joe and Jane Citizen. They don't have that kind of money. So what you're forced to do is get it from special interests who demand a quid pro quo. And by definition, when you're promoting a special interest, you're promoting a special interest over and above the general interest of the population. That's why they call it special. It's not in the public interest that you do these things for a special interest, but to get the money from the special interest to buy these positions, well, you have to sell your soul, you have to sell your vote, you have to do things that constitute bad public policy for America. And I have made one tiny error in that I've talked about it in terms of buying these chairmanships. As Congressman Thomas Massey from Kentucky said on the front page of USA Today, when he went through this experience, it's not really a purchase, it's more like a rental agreement because you got to pay it every 2 years.
Wow, that's a great statement right there.
Yeah, if the public knew what really goes on in the halls of Congress, they'd toss them all out.
I can believe that because just my, this first congressman I've ever interviewed, but the state legislatures I've talked to and everything, I was just surprised at what was going on in Montgomery, and I thought, my God, if they knew what was going on in Montgomery, I mean, the founders would have been shooting by. I mean, if they knew what was going on there, if it was going on in D.C., the founders would be shooting by now.
Well, both places are corrupt, albeit to a certain degree it's legally corrupt. But nonetheless, that corruption corrupts the public policy debate that results in the eye-opening bad public policies that get the voters angry so often. But they don't figure it out. They don't figure out that as often as not, it's their own nice-looking, charismatic congressman or senator who's doing the bad things. We in Alabama, by way of example, when it comes to the greatest threat we face as a nation, which is our solvency, given that we now have a $32 trillion debt burden, we only have 2 or 3 that you can count on out of 9 to do the right thing when it comes to spending within our means. 2 out of 3 out of 9, that's not a winning vote, but that's what Alabama has done.
Yeah, I've been waging a one-man war against the Public Service Commission. I mean, the stuff that they do to Alabama is just appalling. What kills me is you bring this to the forefront and they vote the same people in over and over and over.
And the public is easily led like sheep to the slaughterhouse with the special interest money. It's most unfortunate that the public is so easily seduced into doing the wrong thing for their own interest. And I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. And I'll use Katie Britt as the example. I don't know if you've been noticing her communications efforts, but her communications efforts, her news releases, focus intensely on all the free stuff that she's bringing home to the state of Alabama. It might be pork barrel projects. It might be most recently how she's proud that she's been advocating for free health care. Well, someone's got to pay for that health care. It's socialized medicine. And ultimately, the cost is greater because you've not only got the cost of health care that you're paying for, you've also got the cost of the government folks who intervene and who administer that health care system that you have to pay for. And they don't deliver one item of health care, but you got to pay them because now you've got the government overseeing who gets good health care and who does not. Anyway, we are where we are because the voters, a majority of them just aren't making wise decisions.
Yeah, and it just seems like all they got to do is come out and say they're fighting the Biden agenda or fighting this right here, and they don't care about what people want to do to improve their lives. They just use scare tactics, and people fall for it every cycle.
Yep.
Well, Congressman, that's all the questions I had for you. This has been a great interview. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, I would ask that the American people as they decide what their role is going to be in our republic, always be cognizant of the hundreds of thousands of Americans who have given their lives fighting for our liberty and our freedom and our Constitution that has empowered us to be the greatest nation in world history. And if they are going to, the American people, respect those sacrifices, then the least they can do is do the homework that is necessary to determine which policies are good, which policies are bad, and which candidates for public office will do the good, not the bad. And if they can't find a candidate that's going to do the good rather than the bad, then by golly, they need to run for public office themselves.
Great statement, Congressman. Thank you for your time and service, and thank you for this interview today. And good luck, and hope to see you back in the arena.
All right. Take care.